Welcome everyone to our event this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you're coming in from. We are glad to have you. We're going to be talking about a topic we feel is important. We're talking about how to fill your cup as a caregiver. So I'd like to start off by thanking our event sponsors. You see those listed on the screen here. So my thanks to all of you for participating. Want to show you our learning objectives for this session. Talking about prioritizing self-care among your career and your caregiving obligations. Understanding how having a diverse and inclusive workspace can make those things not only acceptable but encourageable and something that we should all be striving for. And then recognizing that having that self-care routine that works can increase your impact and personal contributions, not just to your organization, but our industry and society overall. So again, we are excited to have you joining us. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists, our conversationalists this morning. First we have is Michelle Acciavatti. Michelle, did I get that right?
You did.
Yay. Michelle is the managing director for the Midwest region at Willis Towers Watson. She is responsible for revenue growth, market development, colleague engagement, and office operations across the Midwest region, leading more than 900 colleagues and managing several key client relationships, prospects, in business, and client service. Back in 2017, Michelle became the first female office leader in the Michigan office, 70-year history, which is amazing. She is passionate about colleague development. She is the co-leader of their North American Inclusion and Diversity Council, responsible for leading business priorities with I&D and ensuring that all the colleagues feel comfortable at Willis Towers Watson. She actively supports Special Olympics of Michigan. Has served on the board for 10 years there and has received the President's Award, the board chair, and the board chair award for her service. You see here her family and her daughter Caitlin. So Michelle, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Susan Imler. Susan leads communications for Swiss Re Americas and for Swiss Re's global P&C reinsurance business. She's been with Swiss Re for more than 13 years in a variety of global and regional roles. Outside of work, she and her husband have managed to get 4 children beyond 15 years for their second wedding this past summer, while also navigating through difficult end of life stages for parents and her in-laws. And you see there her beautiful family and some of her caregiving obligations. So Susan, we're glad to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And we don't normally look that good, so I had to share the wedding picture.
It's a beautiful picture. And last but certainly not least, live from way past the New York, y'all, we have Elana Meyers Taylor. She is the most decorated Black athlete in the history of the Olympic Winter Games. Daughter of a professional football player, Elana is a naturally gifted athlete who at age 9 declared her intention to become an Olympian. And she exceeded that goal in 2010 when she stood on the podium as an Olympic bronze medalist for the U.S. national bobsled team. In 2015, Elana became the first woman to make the U.S. national team as a female bobsled pilot and the first woman to win a medal in international competition in the 4-man event. She is the only female U.S. bobsled athlete to have won 5 Olympic medals. Today, Elana sits on the President's Council of Fitness, Sport, and Nutrition and is a former president of the Women's Sports Foundation. She and her husband, fellow bobsled athlete Nick Taylor, were married in 2014 and have 2 beautiful boys, which you see on the screen. So, Elana, thank you so much for joining us, and especially coming from Claxton. That's kind of exciting.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, if you see a bobsled or 2 go by, we're out here in the ice house doing some of our training to get ready for our upcoming season, just working on our start. So hopefully you guys get to see a sled or 2.
Very, very fun. Okay, well, we're just gonna go ahead and just dive right into our conversation, ladies. Are you ready? Because I'm excited. It's gonna be awesome. So we're talking about prioritizing self-care and how we make sure that we're filling our own cup so we can give to those who need us. So, um, Susan, we'll kind of start with you. How have you prioritized self-care in your life?
Well, thank you. And I just have to say, Alana makes us all feel a little boring here in our corporate offices. So I like to, so first of all, I like to bake on the side. This is something I enjoy in a way for me to relax. And it kind of colors how I have talked about self-care in other places. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term sandwich generation, but that was really popular when I first started in my career, and the idea of being sandwiched between caring for adults and kids. And this is right where I am right now. But I've thought a lot about this, and I feel like it's more like a pie, not a sandwich. And maybe this is, again, colored from my sort of love for pie, but it's I think as women, our lives are like a pie, right? We have all these ingredients, and it's not just parents and kids. It's our jobs, it's our careers, it's our friendships, it's our spiritual life. All of these things we're trying to cram them in this pie. And sometimes it just doesn't work. It overflows. And, we're kind of like the crust trying to hold it together. And sometimes, it's difficult, right? And so what holds the pie together, in my view, is this concept of grace. And this is, I guess, a long-winded answer of your question, which is thinking about self-care. And for me, it comes down to this acronym of GRACE, which is an acronym, but it's also the idea of giving ourselves grace. So the G, and we can talk maybe a little more about this later, but the G is to go with your strengths. The R is to be ready and realistic about expectations. We have A, which is adjust your standards. That's a favorite one of mine. I have a bar towel in our bar at home that says, my standards has lowered with every child. And I have 4, so they're pretty low now. Choose your non-negotiables. And then the last one is E, which is embracing a blend and not a balance. So maybe we can get into some of those later, but I like to kind of think about it that way.
That's awesome. And such a great mindset and a great way to think about it too. Michelle, tell us about how you have prioritized stuff.
Yeah, Susan, I love that concept of grace. We have a couple of mottos in our house that we use to help us with self-care, and grace is definitely one of them. We use it in the form of we're doing the best we can. And some days we can all acknowledge our best isn't all that great. And some days it's wonderful. And on the days when it's not that great, we acknowledge we've made mistakes. We figure out how to do them better, and we move on. We let them go, right? And I know that's permeated throughout my house because we were headed to a track meet and my son forgot his shoes, which is really the only thing you need for a track meet. And he said, but Mom, I did the best I could. I said, that's right, buddy. We did the best we could. And we figured out an answer and we moved on. So that's one grace that works for us. I think the other for us is when you're in these situations, and Susan, I love the concept of the pie and how we have to hold it all together, but sometimes we can't hold it together, and that's okay, right? We have to allow time and space for grief. And in addition to my daughter, I cared for my brother-in-law when he was going through end-stage cancer, and I was driving to the hospital. And we were going to get bad news. I knew we were getting bad news. And I was talking to a friend of mine. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to walk in this hospital. How am I going to do this? And he said, cry on your own time. And I loved that because cry, you're allowed to cry, right? But so if you have to cry in the car on the way to the hospital or cry in the shower, do it so that when you have to stand up and be strong, you can do it. So really just loved that. And then just a couple other quick things with no examples, prioritizing health, and maybe we can talk about that in our non-negotiables, and allowing others to help, right? Another friend of mine says it's in all of our natural instincts to want to help each other. And so when you ask for help, you actually make it easy, because if I know you're going through something and I want to help, I'm racking my brain of ways, and likely I'm not going to come up with the one that's most helpful to you. If you just tell me, I feel great and you get what you need. So ask for help.
That's awesome. So, you mentioned health and things that you do in your son's on the track team. Alana, we're here in our everyday lives. We're just trying to get to the gym or maybe go for a walk. And then there's you, the highly decorated Olympian. You're a whole other level of fitness. So tell us about your caregiving role and the importance of physical fitness in terms of self-care for you and what that looks like.
Yeah, well, to just kind of go off the theme of the pie and holding the pie together too, I think it's a really interesting analogy because we do this thing in our house called dump cake. We don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time to bake. We like to bake anyway. So what you basically do is put all the ingredients of a pie, whether it's blueberries and it's the pie ingredients and all this other stuff, and you just put it in the pan and throw it in the oven, and it's called dump cake. And so even when the pie's not holding together, even when you don't have the perfect lattice strips over stuff, it still tastes pretty darn good. So even though we feel like we can't hold it all together, and I know it sounds kind of weird for this elite athlete to be talking about pie, but it's true. It's still pretty darn good. And some days that's how it is, even as an elite athlete. So movement is something that's very important to me. And I think we all know the studies that say, oh, you need to get in physical fitness and you need to be exercising and all this stuff. And I think living a daily life, sometimes it's hard to think about how can I incorporate this in? But once you get on the path of incorporating it in your day, you realize how important the movement actually is. And I think one of the times it hit me the most that, movement is really about self-care is after I had my second son. So both of my sons I had via C-section. And my second son, I'm really struggling to recover from the C-section. I'm not able to move as much as I want to, but I'm still taking care of two children. And I just was getting so down, so sad. And then one day I just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to throw both these kids in the stroller and we're going to go for a walk. And then little by little, I wasn't able to walk very far, wasn't able to do much. And now you're talking about somebody who's used to being able to push a 400-pound sled as fast as anybody else in the world. And I'm struggling to move a stroller down the street. But even taking those steps of moving a stroller down the street, even taking those little steps made me feel so much better. Getting the endorphin rush, getting my body moving. For me, it's always been a huge part of my self-care. But throughout times, even though I'm an elite athlete, it's been how do you incorporate that into an already busy schedule? Whether it is taking that set of stairs, and it sounds cliche, but it really does make a difference. And there's going to be periods in your life where it's just going to be enough to pull out the stroller because that's all you can do. But even you telling yourself that it's okay and talking about some of the things we've already discussed today, having the grace to understand that, yes, you want to be able to get to the gym every single day and run 3 miles and all this kind of stuff. But some days it's just about putting one foot in front of the other and doing whatever you can to just get moving. And you're going to feel that much better for it.
I think we can quit there because there are people right now who have been like, you mean it's okay to eat pie and it's okay to just take a walk? And the answer is yes. And I love that. So thank you so much because that's awesome.
Christina, can I build on that a little bit?
Please,
And Elana, I have to echo, like, I'm so happy to hear you eating pie, even, and if it's a dump cake, that's okay. But I just wanted to build on that because I think it's so true. And I wanted to share just a personal story because hopefully it helps someone else out there. And it's a bit similar, but I was never a fitness person. And I had this job and kids, and there just wasn't any space for my life in that or for that. But then I found myself in a place where I was walking through airports, for example, or even just taking the dog for a walk around the block, and I started to feel dizzy. And I thought, what is wrong with me? And of course, your mind automatically goes to the worst possible thing. And so I lived with this for quite some time. Finally went to the doctor, and they did all these blood tests. And the doctor came in, and she said, "I just think you're out of shape." That was it. You're out of shape. And this, hit me hard. And at about the same time, I had a friend, a neighbor who was going to a spin class every morning at 5:30 in the morning, 2 mornings a week. And I just thought that was completely out of my realm of possibility. And this friend said, you know what, she also does a class on Monday nights. Just try that. So my word I guess my point here is that I tried it the Monday night. And so just pick one thing. I picked that one thing. And that's it, because I think it gets so overwhelming with all the things you can do, and you want to do everything, and then you end up doing nothing. And so I picked that one thing and started going on a Monday night, and I found a community of people that I really enjoyed. And I finally, after 30 years of raising kids, found an activity that I really loved that also made me fit. And so fast forward a couple years later, I had the motivation to fit into my mother of the bride dress, and I did. Lost a few dress sizes. I am going now twice a week at that 5:30 class, and I live for it. And it really has helped me weather a lot of other crises that have come up in my life, in the last year. So just wanted to share the story if it helps.
Susan, I love that, because I love that it pairs a community too, right? I think as women, and we've got so many things we're trying to fit in, finding a way to couple that exercise or that something with friends, right? With a community, one, just helps hold you accountable, but two, gives you, that much needed friend time, right? I run in the mornings with my neighborhood girlfriends, and invariably somebody doesn't want to get up and somebody else does, right? There's three of us, so one of us will motivate the others. But we have is, we're not running that fast, but we're getting out there, and we're getting also some community time, which I think is equally as important to fit into our lives.
Yeah. And I love the just pick one thing, because personally, I've had those moments where it's like, well, I need to be eating right, and I need to be tracking what I'm doing, but I also need to go to the gym, and I have work, and I have this. And, I was talking to the counselor, and she's like, okay, you just need to stop and just pick one. And it's okay if you're not getting to the gym or you're not tracking everything, if you're just eating well. And I needed to hear that. And sometimes we just need to hear that it's okay to just pick one. Just pick one. So that's great.
It goes back to grace, right? It goes back to how Susan started us. It's grace.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And it doesn't even have to be the gym. I think sometimes when we think about our physical fitness and stuff like that, the first thing that goes to your mind is sitting on a treadmill and running on a treadmill, or some of those types of exercises. But there's all types of things in your community that most people don't even realize they're there. Like in my community, we have adult gymnastics. And so that's a very fun way to go out there and try things you might have never tried, might been years since you tried it, since you were a little kid, or just trying to experiment and not be afraid to go out there and be silly. I think that's another thing with physical fitness, is it gives us an opportunity to go out there and play, in a sense, and we lose that sense of play when we're adults. So trying different things, trying different sports, maybe even taking a bobsled passenger ride every once in a while, just finding different ways to get that kind of physical fitness, but also find stuff we enjoy. That's another thing we tend to do when we're caregiving and we're spending so much time focused on other people. We forget to take the time to find out what truly makes us happy. And yes, the people we love make us happy, and we love doing what we do, and we will care for them as much as we can, but you can't pour from an empty cup. And so you have to find ways to fill your cup back up. And so some of mine have been doing physical activity, and what form that looked like has changed throughout the years. And some days, even as an elite athlete, it's going to the playground and going down slides and going monkey bars. Although monkey bars are way harder as an adult, but just trying different things.
Yes, they are. So outside of the physical care, Michelle, talk to us maybe some things that you are doing that's for self-care, but it's not physical. Like, do you journal? Do you just, sit and read with a cup of coffee? Like, what does self-care look for you outside of the physical?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think one, it's making sure we take breaks. I said before, kind of asking others for help, right? And realize the others aren't going to do it as perfect as you do. No one is, right? But that's okay. Like, accept that. Accept that, the meal might not be perfect, the house might not be perfect, all of those sorts of things. Take the breaks, right? So I think that's one. I think the other, I read. I like to read. And then every day I have a devotional book. So for me, I take, 5 minutes, sometimes it's 30 seconds, whatever. It just kind of first thing in the morning, and just try to reset my day. I have a client that at the start of every meeting, they do a reflection. And I love that. It's just a saying something to like bring you back to center. So for me, that's what that kind of devotional book does, is it just kind of bring back to center for a few minutes, and then, and then start the day.
That's awesome. Susan, what about you?
I love that, Michelle. So many different things, right? But if I go with my GRACE acronym, and I like, I guess on the be ready and realistic, there are a few things there. I think we talked a little bit about being realistic. Things are okay if they're not perfect. I think, especially I'm assuming many of the people here have jobs where, you're in whatever, in a corporate setting. I think this also bubbles over into being realistic with your coworkers and your direct line manager, because we're all people. And I think it helps. You're not bearing this alone. So being realistic, letting people around you know what's going on in your life, and I think it helps just level set for expectations. I have a short story or short anecdote about this when I came into the role that I'm in right now, which was leading communications for the Americas, right? And we had our CEO, who was my big stakeholder, right? And actually, the day of the interview for the job, which I ended up not going to the interview, was the day of my father's funeral. And right after that, my mother fell and ended in the hospital, and we began this very steep, slippery slide with her health. So I'm in this brand new job, my dream job, and I'm sitting in the hospital with my mom. I hadn't yet even met the CEO that I was going to be working with. And he sent me a message that said, I hear that you're in the hospital. I hear, whatever. I hear you're in the hospital. Take all the time that you need. That to me was just an incredible game changer. And I love that story. And I think we could do that also for the people around us. So I guess maybe that's, a little bit on being realistic, and, not to feel guilty when the personal takes priority, because there will always be a balance. And I think the other kind of piece of this is using your calendar, using your work calendar, and to block the times that you need to do things. If it's a doctor's appointment with my mother, whatever it might be, I just put it in my calendar and I treat the personal stuff just as I would all of the work obligations.
That calendar piece is really important. And that's something I've learned I've had to do over the years too. Like, my daughter has a concert. Guess what? I'm out the door early. I got to get to a concert because that's a priority, because she's more important than her. So what you just said too kind of brought up some things. We have the day to day, and we talked about what that looks like on a regular day basis, but then we get that curveball in life, right? We get somebody's in the hospital. Oh, somebody just quit on me and I don't know what to do, right? So there's self-care in the ordinary, then there's self-care in the extraordinary. So Elana, I want to kind of talk with you a little bit about that. What did that look like for you? Because you mentioned in a little bit in your story that you've had some of those things where it's just not the normal, and I don't know what to do in this situation. This has never been good. How do you manage self-care in those situations?
Yeah, so one of the hardest periods of my life was I was 36 weeks pregnant with my son and went in for a checkup and thought everything was normal. I had my bag in the car. I was going to go do a workout after this appointment, was all ready to go. And all of a sudden, doctor's like, I don't like the way this baby's moving. You're going to go have this baby now. And I was like, what? I have nothing planned. I don't know what you're talking about. So, lo and behold, I had the baby a couple of days later, and he had to spend time in the NICU. And for anybody who has spent time in the NICU, can be one of the most soul crushing places in the world, whether it's your child that's in there, or whether it's someone or whether you're seeing the families in there day in and day out, and you have that commonality. And I think for us, it was me and my husband, it was very important to manage our self-care during that time. And one of the ways that we really were able to do it is using humor and using the fact that, we're in there fighting for our kid. We're in there doing whatever we can, but there's these small moments that we're in there together, and we can find ways to make each other laugh, to make each other smile, to find a little levity in the situation, because everything felt so heavy at that time. So whether it's, I'm sitting there singing to my son, and whether he's making fun that I don't quite know all the words and I'm making up half the words, or whether it's during our little breaks, finding times to joke about what the hospital food is like, or things like that. Like adding humor to a heavy situation really felt like self-care in that moment. And then it's all those other things, yes, I'm not going out and, I think sometimes people think about self-care, they think about going to a spa or going to get your nails done or something like that. But of course, you're not doing any of that. But it is about making sure, even though you're in one of the hardest circumstances of your life, trying to get as much sleep as you can, trying to stay hydrated, trying to do all those little things that we kind of forget about in daily living that we should be doing anyways, but it's even more important when you're in those stressful times. So for me, it's even as simple as just carrying around a water bottle, carrying around some extra food, or having extra food on hand, to do those little things. Because when you're in those most stressful situations of your life, it's more important to do those little things, because it's going to pay dividends down the line. And also the whole concept of grace, of what we've been talking about, like when you're in those circumstances, part of what makes it so hard is there's so many unknowns. And give yourself some credit for us not knowing all the medical jargon, or not knowing exactly what will happen based off these decisions. Like, you're not an expert, but there's experts around you that you can lean on. There's people you can lean on. So it's part of this grace, giving yourself grace that although you want to do everything, you don't know everything, and you have to rely on help. So some of the themes that Michelle and Susan have already brought up are even more important when you're in the hardest periods of your life.
Elana, there's something you said about that I love. Is when you're in those situations, it's also okay to find something that you actually know how to do and are good at, and do that for a minute. Because my daughter had heart surgery when she was 4 months old. So same thing. We spent a lot of time in the PICU, and I did a little bit of work on the side, and everyone's like, "Why are you working? Stop working." And it's like, because I need to do something that I actually know how to do, right? Because what's happening here is very out of control, and I don't know the jargon. I don't know anything. I just need a minute to like reset and realize I'm capable. So, and do something that I know how to do. And that's okay, right? And so, thinking about if you need to take that break to do something to just refill your cup a little bit, give yourself some confidence, go do it. That's perfectly fine.
And for me, it was during the time my son was born in the NICU. They were actually having bobsled world champions. So it was actually, I'm on the hospital bed and trying to recover from a C-section and everything. Meanwhile, I'm texting some of the girls back in Germany at the time, and trying to help them out with pushing tips, and trying to help them out with other things, which, people were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Well, this is a stressful reliever, believe it or not. Like, normally when I'm competing, it's pretty stressful, but at this point in my life, this is really helping me get through this really tough moment.
Susan, any thoughts to share?
I think they've covered it. I love this. Maybe just to bring this down also to the practical for me, I think a few things that have helped me over the years is just trying to remove those shoulds and coulds, shoulds from your vocabulary. I think we as women just put an incredible high bar. And I think especially I feel for the younger moms today, because you have this added pressure of social media, which is just, I think, completely destructive. So I think, close that off, set your own bar for things. On a personal level, for me, I think one of the things that we did, and we talked a little bit about this with adjusting your standards, is we didn't feel like we had to show up to every child's sporting event. We didn't put the children in, club sports. We were very, I think, intentional. I think today, especially with the pressure to perform, and you want your kids to be good, and you feel this sense of needing to do more. And that is one thing that really saved us, was we just were super practical with what they were going to be involved in, because we found that time as a family, and I'm finding this today. I mean, you saw the picture of my crew there, and I really feel like those decisions that we made when our children were young have paid dividends now as they're older, because that, sort of just investment in time as a family versus running around to all these different things. It's a balance. And for us, that worked really well. a few other things that I guess I have tried to do in terms of sort of thinking about your non-negotiables. Like we talked about self-care. I mean, even in the workplace, there are certain things like if my child calls or 2 times in a row calls, then I know, I will take that call no matter what, right? If they call and I'm free, I'll answer it. But if I'm in the middle of something important, if it's a double call, I know to pick up the phone. I've tried to do little things like make sure I take the day off when it's their birthday. And maybe lastly, just because it has been a fun thing for us. I don't know how many people listening, deal with the Sunday scaries and just that feeling, right, of the impending week. And for us, that was always, I just hated that time. And so I incorporated this pie thing, right? So like you, Michelle, it's one thing I felt like I could control. I can stand in the kitchen, I can do this. I can maybe do it with one of the kids or by myself. But we created this family tradition called Sunday night pie. And you could do this with anything else, right? Any other tradition. It could be a walk, or it could be your dump cake, or it could be anything. But for us, this really, well, it was Sunday night pie. So I'd have something in the oven or something going, and it was something we could all look forward to. So when everybody was sort of off in their corners, feeling grumpy about, school starting on Monday morning, we would sit down together as a family as sort of the last thing we did on a weekend. And the pie obviously disappears in minutes, but it just prompted a nice way to reconnect. So I just throw that out there as another sort of practical thing that has helped me care for myself, but also for the family.
That reconnection is important. I personally, I when I travel, it's never easy for my girls, and so our tradition is, as mommy's getting ready to pack up, and or I am packing or getting ready for bed, funny cat videos, because it's just something silly to just take your mind off of it. And so we'll pile up on the bed, and I'll have the dog on one side, the cat on the other side, and have 2 girls, and we just watch funny cat videos on YouTube for about 5-10 minutes. And it's just something to just kind of be. And then it's like, okay, and now it's time for bed. And then we kind of, they do their thing. But it's that connection, right? It's that just that way of just having a little bit of time with those that are the most important, and saying that this is what it means. This is what this matters. This is why I do what I do. So. Okay. All of you have big careers, right? Michelle and Susan, you're very high level in your organizations. Elana, you've reached that pinnacle of athletic with being on the Olympic teams. And so big careers and big roles, they can take a lot of time away, right? And so we kind of talked a lot about this, but when you talk about that balance, it's some kind of work-life balance. It could be a balance of, the work and the family, but this is also a balance of work and family and ourselves. So talk about a time when you had to put one ahead of the other, and how if that was a struggle or not a struggle, and then how you were able to kind of keep going and then come out of that situation, perhaps. So we'll go alphabetical order. So Michelle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Susan talked a little bit about this, the support, the broader support from your company. So in my mind, you have this discretionary effort, right? You have the stuff you do every day and you know how to do it. And you have this extra discretionary effort. And at any point in time, you put it at your job, you put it at your family, you put it at your community or your other things, right? You pick, and it flexes throughout your life. Well, there was a point in my career when the market leader role for Michigan, you mentioned that, I was the market leader. So the first time the market leader role for Michigan came available, I was in the middle of an all-out war with the school to get my daughter an education. They thought education meant teaching her how to go out to lunch. I thought education meant reading and math, and we were at an impasse. And the role became available, and one of the leaders came to me and said, you're going to post for the role. And I said, I want that role. Like, that's a role I want. But right now, my discretionary effort has to be with getting this school thing figured out. So I'm not going to post for it. I would like it someday. I want you to know I want it. And I would like to kind of do things to start getting me, so that I'm ready when it's open next. but right now she gets my effort. And, to their credit, they took that. I took on some extra things. And when the role became available the next time, I had her in a better place and I could devote my energy to that. And I think it's kudos to my organization that was an okay answer, right? That it was okay to say, right now, this gets the win. And I probably could have done it. I probably could have balanced both, but I would have compromised my overall self-care, right? I would have ran myself ragged and she wouldn't have got my full attention when she needed it. So that's probably one of the best decisions, I ever made. And, I got a lot of pushback. Why not? Why not? But, to my company's credit and to the leaders' credit, it didn't hurt me at all.
That's awesome. Susan, what about you?
So I like this phrase, you can have everything, you just can't have it all at once. That totally echoes what you just said, Michelle. Yep. And I think the whole idea of work-life balance, I've come to believe that there really is no such thing as balance. It's never in balance. And I like to think of it more as a blend. So I don't know, a few examples there. And my career also, just full disclosure, has ebbed and flowed as my family has changed, right? And I worked full-time, then part-time, then part-time some more with another child, then number 3 came along and I was still doing part-time and I felt like I didn't feel like I was doing a good job at being a mom or being, a coworker, or at least that's how I felt. And so I decided at that time to just quit cold turkey and be home with my children. So for about 8 years, I did that and worked part-time and then eventually, came back full-time. So I like to share that also because I think it's sometimes we feel like if we step off the treadmill, you'll never get back on. And I like to debunk that myth, especially today. I think it's much easier for women today. So that's just a side note. But I've also, over the years, and people who know me know this, I have found ways to incorporate my children and my life as part of my job. So I have been, in a role that, especially in the last 10 years, has involved a lot more travel. And so my kids have been to a lot of places because I bring them with me. My daughter, when she was in college and I had to be in Brazil for an event, she had an internship and she helped with this event. So little examples like that. And when she was a preschooler, I would bring her to work and she would have oatmeal in the cafeteria before my work day started. And she still talks about that and remembers that. So just, it has changed over the course of my career, but I really try and think about that philosophy of, how do you blend the two? And I try and extend that grace also to the people on my team, right? Who, when I see them having these challenges, I want everybody to feel comfortable that, you can make that shift if you need to. And I think, especially today with remote work and, the different flexibilities that we have, you can lean into that a little bit more when you need to.
That's a beautiful thing. And, I'm thinking, dive in our 10 years and it's about sustainability. And what you just said is how you sustain that balance. I love the word balance. I'm stealing that. I hope you don't mind. I'm totally stealing it. And it's no longer a balance, it's a blend. It's a blend, not a balance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Elana, talk to us a little bit about how you manage everything. You are managing a lot.
Yeah, so I've definitely learned that it is a blend. It's not a balance. Everything isn't going to be perfectly level across the board and things like that. And I think being an elite athlete is inherently one of the most selfish things you could do. And like I don't shy away from saying that, because in order to reach the pinnacle of your sport, in order to make sure your body is maximized, you have to pour time into every little decision. What you eat, what time you wake up, how many hours you sleep, what you do during your rest time, what you do during your downtime. Like, it all matters. And so throughout my career, before I was a mom, I spent every single waking hour thinking about how I could maximize, how I could fight for every hundredth of a second, how I could go above and beyond to be the best athlete I could be. And so you spend so much time doing that. And then to transition that into now adding on top of a mom, well, obviously that's not going to work. From the pure fact that I just have this other child that depends on me, and even in my case, I was breastfeeding. So how is all this going to work together? How am I going to manage all this? And it is a learning process. It is about finding out what works best for you and your family and how you can blend it all together. And so in my case, my husband works for the Sacramento Kings, and believe it or not, NBA schedule is way more difficult than a bobsled schedule. So my kids travel with me. They're a lot of times at my trainings, a lot of times at different things. But at the end of the day, if they get sick, if they have anything going on, it's me who's going to pick them up. It's me who's doing the childcare. It's me who's staying home with them. And so throughout my career, I've as a mom and now as an athlete, I've had those interruptions. And the old athlete of me would be freaking out. Oh my gosh, I'm missing this workout because my kid's sick. What am I going to do? How am I going to still be able to compete? How am I going to be able to do those things? And how I've kind of shifted my mindset is that it's focused on what I'm doing at the time. So even if I have to miss a workout because my child's sick, it's okay, because when I am working out, I am 100% focused on training. I'm 100% focused on what I'm doing at that amount of time, so that when I go back home, that I know I've put everything I had. And I'm not saying it's 100% every day, but I put everything I had that day into that task at that amount of time. So then when I go home on the other side, I'm putting everything I have. And like I said, some days it's going to be 100%, some days it might be 40%, but I'm putting everything I have into child rearing. And when I'm with my kids, I give everything I have and just make sure I'm with them. So for the majority of time, my kids take my precedence over my athletic career. I've been fortunate enough to win medals and everything like that. And if my performance suffers, well, yes, that means less medals, and yes, that means less prize money. But I only have a certain amount of time with these kids while they're little. My kids are 1 and 4. I only have so much time while they're little. Pretty soon they're going to be off doing their own things. They're going to be off, and they're not going to care what mom's doing. And, I'll be lucky if I get a phone call every couple of days or whatnot. So during this time period, it's okay for them to take the precedent. But one example where, I kind of had to balance my work and my child rearing responsibilities is breastfeeding. So I breastfed my first son for 2 years. My second son, I was breastfeeding him. We were doing really well. He wanted to continue to breastfeed, and probably to this day would still be breastfeeding. But it got to the point where I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I haven't felt my own body in the past 4 years. I've been either pregnant or breastfeeding, or I've been taking care of everybody else for the past 4 years. I cannot do this anymore. I am going crazy. So, and also I felt like it was starting to affect my athletic performance too. So at that point in time, I had to make a decision. Okay, I know you want to keep doing this, but I've got to stop. Like, I've got to take care of me in this moment. And we can use other types of milk. You're at the point where you're feeding yourself now, so we can move on for this. But that was an active decision that I had to make, where I had to put myself, so to speak, and my athletic career above my child. And I don't say that lightly, because it sounds like a harsh thing to say, but there was that give and take, and there was that kind of blending of the situations to try and find a solution that was best for us. And he's great. He still likes to cuddle with mommy, and nothing's lost there. But it is a blend of things, and never fully you feel a balance.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, the stories and all of you kind of sharing things, and it's just bringing so many things up from my personal, because I have stories that I could share right along with you of childcare and taking care of others, and spouses or partners that might have special needs or things that they are struggling with, and the day to day, and just how hard it can be. So it's encouraging just for me to hear from all of you, to hear how you've been able to succeed and keep going and reach the levels that you've been able to reach while still doing all of the things. So it's been awesome. We have a few more minutes left. I do want to say, I should have said this at the very beginning, if there's any questions, Michelle and Susan and Elana are more than welcome to take those questions and answer them and hear from you. So please use the Q&A feature that you see there in the platform. And we will get to as many as we can whenever we are done here in a few minutes. So we have about 5 minutes left, and then we'll hit into the Q&A. But in that time, just, I guess, a final question for all of you is, out of everything that we talked about, what advice could you give? What support could you give to on how to support your employees or those around you with caregiving? And Susan and Michelle, it's definitely for you, but Elana, you definitely have people that you mentor and support. So what advice do you give them to be able to have and to now give to those listening to us? What do you got?
Well, I jumped my
because you're like, I'm ready to go.
maybe a little prematurely, but it was a bit of advice that someone gave me. And I wanted to share it today. If anyone listening is in this place, and Michelle, you talked about this early on, the idea of allowing some time to grieve. And for anyone who's dealing with a grieving situation, and my personally is a mother who is was a huge positive role in my life and is now just a shell, right? And we're dealing with dementia, and it's a really, really rough road that I never imagined would be this difficult. And someone gave me a bit of advice around this, which was, I found myself every day mourning kind of what I was losing, what was missing, and the mom that I didn't have anymore. And it was tearing me up. It's tough. But the advice was stop, that your mom will never be as good as she is today. I mean, it is a decline. So stop sort of looking back and mourning the loss and just begin celebrating what your mom can do today. And I think that kind of advice applies in a lot of different ways. So that's how I've tried to reframe my thinking, particularly when I spend time with her. And we just, I just celebrate the fact that, she comments that my hair doesn't look good, because then I know that my mom, right, she's still in there. And yeah, I started taking a selfie with her every time I visit, because I would feel guilty that I wasn't there enough. And so I take a selfie every time. And now I've got a whole scroll on my phone that just is as a nice little reminder of the different moments that, I have had. So just something that I wanted to share because it was helpful to me and I thought it might help others.
Yeah, I think a piece of advice I would give, and it's more to leaders, right, and how to support others. And Susan and I both shared examples, but I think it's really simple, and it's that what you do matters way more than what you say. And so, to your point, Christina, put in your calendar that you're going to your kid's concert and make it open so that people can see you're doing that, right? We had a colleague who had a sick family member, and they were a leader, and they got on the call and said, I'm going to be at every meeting. Don't worry, I'm not going to miss anything. I'll still be here. And I pulled them aside after and I said, no, you won't. I said, no. And you're going to tell people I'm not here today because I'm with this person at chemo, because when it happens to them, they're going to remember that you did it, and they're going to feel safe, and that they're going to feel like it's okay to do it. If you don't do it, when it happens to them, even if you say, it's okay, I want you to do this, they are not going to believe you because you didn't do it. So I think, as all of us, be vulnerable, share your stories, because somebody else is going through it. And by you sharing it, you're going to help somebody else.
And that totally pulls in the culture that we're trying to have and what Dive In is all about, which is being inclusive and making sure everyone feels that they're part of the team. And how better to do that than to say, I'm going to be an example for you of how it's okay to be, which is be yourself and be vulnerable and be open with what you need, because we're going to be here to help you through that. That's beautiful.
I have a friend and colleague who was a leader of large teams, and I love that she used to say, I like to leave loudly. So if she had to leave at 4:00 for a kid activity, she would leave loudly so that people
Everybody knew
she was taken off early.
Do that. That's awesome. Elana, you are leader of your bobsled team, right? You're the driver. You're kind of the point person. You led the team. So how have you been able to give advice to those on your team or those around your team or just other Olympians or athletes on how they can be supported and support each other, but also getting support? Like, how does that work for you? How can you share?
Yeah, so I'm a perfectionist by nature. So my piece of advice I had to take for myself is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Sometimes it's going to be good enough. It may not be perfect in your eye, but it's going to be good enough. And that goes for everything, for training, for parenting, for caregiving, for work situations. There's going to be days where it's not going to be perfect. Everything's not going to line up. Every number is not going to add up perfectly and stuff like that. But that's okay. Some days you have to be okay with good enough and learning to be content with good enough. I think for on my parenting journey, that's especially come into play because both my sons are deaf. And so to have this child and not know how to communicate with them right when they're born, and they're profoundly deaf, so they have maybe loud planes or helicopters, maybe they could hear. So to have to learn a whole new language, you spend day in and day out thinking, it's got to be perfect. I've got to be fluent in ASL before I'm going to be able to communicate with this. But I think sometimes we let that idea of perfection paralyze us and thinking, oh, it's got to be perfect before I start. But sometimes, some days it's just good enough. So don't be afraid to put one foot in front of the other and be good enough for that day. Be good enough for that situation. And you'll get there day in and day out. And that applies to everything. And we try to incorporate that with our athletes too. Is a lot of them, they're afraid to even, they've got rookies out here right now trying bobsled for the first time, and they're afraid to fall. They're afraid to look foolish, or they're afraid that everybody's going to make fun of them. And it's like, no, you're going to fall. You're going to make a fool of yourself, but it's okay. It's part of the learning process, and it's good enough. It's not ever going to be perfect. And I think people see people who win a gold medal and think, oh, they did it because they were perfect. And no, it wasn't. I haven't seen a perfect bobsled run ever. There's always been things, even from gold medalists, that I could pick out that are wrong, that are incorrect. And even the times where I've had the best runs of my life, I could pick out mistakes. So don't let perfect be good enough, and don't be afraid to be content in that good enough.
That's awesome. So, yeah, again, anyone out in the audience that has questions, please, put them in the Q&A. So I have one for you that was kind of, and I'll say maybe this is something that, I've always struggled with, and given the careers that you've had, the travel piece of the jobs and the careers. And I know personally it's hard leaving the family, but it's also hard when you're traveling and you're in the hotel and you're out to dinners and you're in new places, and being able to kind of take care of yourself and those things too it's just hard because you're just tired from all things. So how have you all been able to kind of keep your self-care going while you travel? Anyone kind of want to share a tip or two that you've been able to make happen?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just say one of the simple things I do, because you can get it anywhere in the world, is a coffee break. Like, I literally give myself a coffee break. So whether it's sitting in a hotel room with the Keurig that they have there for 5 minutes and just taking a second to decompress from whatever I'm doing, it's just literally taking time to sip and enjoy coffee and not think about whatever I want to think about, or not think about whatever I want to think about. And you can do that wherever you are. So it's a literally coffee break. And sometimes it's as much as like sitting in a rental car for an extra 5 minutes before you go inside to a work meeting, to just have a cup of coffee, to just sit and be with yourself for a second. And I just literally call it my coffee break.
That's awesome.
Oh, Christina, once I got on my fitness roll here with my friend who turned me on to cycling, I do a lot of traveling overseas where you're jumping time zones and jumping, flying and going right to work. So I have found or started to prioritize hotels that have a Peloton bike in them, because it allows you can just hop right on and have that time, even if it's a 20-minute thing. And if that's not the case, I'll find another place where I can do that, or at least go for a run. And particularly when it comes to, other time zones, I have discovered that putting an hour and a half blocker in the calendar and slipping away to get outside, go for a walk. Our company has a gym that I've discovered now that has just really helped me, again, just to make it a priority, because you won't regret it. And another thing that I wanted to share, that I have colleagues who do this, because Christina, you mentioned your young girls and how it's tough to leave them. And I have one friend who brings his daughter's little stuffed animal with him when he travels, and he takes pictures of the animal in different places, and I just think that's a lot of fun. Everybody has fun with it, and it's a nice way, I think, to connect with your kids even when you're away.
I love that.
Yeah. I like Susan. I prioritize trying to get a workout or a run in. I love being able to run in a new city, right? And just explore the town and see things. So I try to squeeze that in. I also have a ritual since my son started driving that I call him on his way to school every day. And so when I travel, I'm in Eastern time. It's generally Central. So I can get up early. I try to stay on Eastern time when I'm there. And I just try to, even if it's a good morning, have a good day. I try to really never miss the call on the way to school, and then the call or the text before bed. That's kind of our consistent family ritual.
Yeah, the phone calls and texts are important for my girls too. It's my oldest is in school by 7, so no matter where I am, I'll be like, "Hey, have a great day. I love you."
Yeah.
Right. And then the youngest one is eating breakfast around 8, so no matter what, I'm like, she's eating breakfast and she's in one place. So I got
Yep.
5 minutes to do a video call and she's in one place, and just have that little bit of time, and it makes it just a big difference. But I have to say this too. I also have to make a time with my husband, right? He needs that connection just as much as my girls do.
Yep.
Right. So making sure he feels that connection, that he's not alone, that I understand all the things that he's having to deal with while I'm gone, and the importance of making him a bit of a priority as well.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot, but everyone needs to look at this important. So
There is also an upside in that it gives everyone a little bit of independence too, which I think is good, right? It's time for my husband to have his own relationship and their own traditions when I'm not home. I try not to be offended when my daughter wants my husband to park in my spot in the garage because it means I'm not coming home. I try not to be offended by that. But there is good that comes of that, right? They develop independence and they develop their own special things that's really important for them.
and they can
Michelle,
look at us.
in my house, it was rude dinner contests when mom wasn't home.
Yeah.
So the kids love that.
But it's also important. And one thing I try to remember too is they see me being able to be a mom and work, and I might miss a thing here and there, but I'm there for the big stuff, right? I'm there for the concerts, and I'm there for the black belt tests, and I'm there for the cheer off competitions, and I'm at every swim meet on a Saturday morning because I can get up on a Saturday morning and go to a swim meet, right? So they see the important things, and they see where they are the priority. And so, yeah, I might not be here all the time. Y'all aren't there all the time, but they see it. And I think that's important. All right, we have a minute left. Any final words of wisdom?
I would just say thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and I hope that everyone was able to pick up something from this. I know I certainly did. So I think we can always learn from each other.
Yes, same. Lucky to have a chance to talk with all of you. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's really cool talk.
Awesome. Well, again, my thanks to the 3 of you for joining us from everywhere you are. Elana, we wish you all the best at trials.
Good
We will be
luck.
cheering you on at the Olympics forever. I mean, where they're going to be. Where are you going next? Where are they?
We actually host World Championships this year in Lake Placid, New York, in March of 2025, and then our Olympics are February 2026 in Milan, Cortina, Italy.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to know somebody personally, so we'll be cheering you on. We wish you all the best. Michelle and Susan, again, thank you so much. Safe travels with all of you, and I hope that everyone watching has a fantastic day and enjoy the last day of Dive In. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.